We're on the watch for the active ear. Hello and welcome to another edition of JazzWatch. Yours truly, the Watchman, Greg Bryant on the microphone. Glad to have you with us. Stay tuned, for in this episode we speak with 7-string guitarist Charlie Hunter. A new CD, Not Getting Behind, is the new Getting Ahead, featuring Scott Amendola on the drums. Our chat with Charlie Hunter in just a few moments. Reminding you, though, you can follow and connect with us here on JazzWatch in a number of outlets. That's twitter.com/gbjazzwatch, facebook.com/jazzwatch, and on YouTube, youtube.com/gbjazzwatch. We're also now on Stitcher. Hooray! All right. And of course, our online home, you can always find us at jazzwatch.wordpress.com. Before we begin, special shouts out to Noel Rose of Brooklyn, New York, and Mr. Graham Spice of Lexington, Virginia, and to others of you that shared your reflections on episode 1. I feel energized and encouraged to continue. You can drop us a line with any questions or suggestions that you have. Looking forward to connecting with you one-on-one. As I mentioned at the end of our last podcast, I was fortunate to attend the 2013 JazzConnect Conference held in New York City just a few weeks ago, as presented by the Jazz Forward Coalition. It was good to meet so many musicians and see them out, as well as executives and presenters, all of them in one space, many of them also in town for the APAP conference for arts presenters. The registration for Jazz Connect was at no cost, and registered conference goers could attend or roam freely through any of the 16 panels that ranged from streaming rights issues to the new musicians mentorship models. All of these seminars provided over the course of 2 days, and 2 of the seminar panels that I happened to attend and felt were particularly important concerned the 21st Century Jazz Tour and the truth about jazz radio for the DIY, the do-it-yourself model that many artists are employing these days. I think that it's helpful to learn about the different approaches and the different ideas that gatekeepers look for when they present rising talent on the air and on the stage. For the touring panel, drummer and composer Allison Miller was important to hear from as a self-managed artist who has begun to successfully tour and promote her own projects apart from her own work with such luminaries as Annie DeFranco, Dr. Lonnie Smith, and Bill Allison, to name a few. Artist managers Gail Boyd and Liz Pinta of Medeski, Martin and Wood. Both of them shed light on ways that artists can cut costs in the beginning to promote not only economic but physical sustainability while on the road. Very, very helpful information. On the broadcast side of things, it was good to meet and hear from moderator Derek Lucas of 90.1 in Rochester, New York, and Mark Ruffin of Sirius Satellite Radio's Real Jazz channel as they dissected a select group of new recordings to explain why they would or would not air them. These gentlemen, along with other panelists, brought to light certain programming preferences. It's kind of interesting to hear that there's a shortage of jazz male vocal records out there, that some jazz stations won't air much blues-based material. The preference towards most jazz stations toward a mostly acoustic sound, but not the acoustic guitar. Preferences towards second-generation standards versus the Great American Songbook. And the proliferation of female vocal recordings and which tunes overall can make the cut without, say, a ride cymbal or a traditional swing beat. Very, very interesting information to know if you're an artist considering doing a radio campaign. You'll want to reach out to the radio programmer or music director in your area, sort of get a take on what they dig and what they don't dig. You're going to do the music the way you want to do it, but if you're going to invest in a radio campaign, it might be good to know kind of what they're looking for, and you make your judgment accordingly with going forward. And while I was not able to attend the panel on presenting jazz more creatively, I think the panel titled Race in Jazz yielded a hidden gem at the very end of the discourse, and a question that I hope the organizers of JazzConnect and the music community at large can begin to seriously address in the years to come, and that is, how do we cultivate and provide access to arts funding and programming for youth and among members of underrepresented populations? That's a real issue that can have some positive results if we address it right. If we want to ensure that youth and members of underrepresented populations have the chance to experience live and creative music, then they must learn to not only desire it, but have access to capital and access to create opportunities for that music to happen. It would also be great to see more festivals, clubs, and performing arts groups in general diversify their talent buying, creative, and artistic committees, in my opinion. And again, although this issue is a grand one, that might be something that could be investigated should the JazzConnect committee decide to fine-tune things for future panels. Of course, on the live music side of things, Winter Jazz Festival was on full swing a couple of weeks ago during the same time period of JazzConnect. Big success, 6 venues all participating in the Village in New York, hosting 2 nights of fabulous shows. Shout out to Bryce Rosenblum and his staff. Many of the other clubs in the city hosting fantastic acts as well during that period. A couple of weeks ago, the Blue Note featuring Donald Harrison's great group with Ron Carter and Billy Cobham. Smalls with a great series of gigs for drummer Gregory Hutchinson. And also the Jazz Standard hosting the Dr. Lonnie Smith Trio and Octet. Some great music during that APAP weekend in New York. If you want to see brief clips and highlights of the JazzConnect conference, you can head over to the JazzWatch YouTube channel at youtube.com/gbjazzwatch, and you can catch a clip of the good doctor, Dr. Lonnie, at the Hammond B3 in action at the Jazz Standard a couple of weeks ago. That's youtube.com/gbjazzwatch. We're always on the watch for the active ear, and we thank you for tuning in. Our interview with Charlie Hunter is up next. Stay tuned to JazzWatch. And as we talk about the DIY do-it-yourself model, I recently had the opportunity to speak with 7-string guitarist Charlie Hunter about that approach. Having seen and employed both models of operation, Charlie is still about getting in the van and driving those thousands of miles around the country to bring the music to the people. He's endured and seen changes not only in the music industry, but also within the communities as he travels around. And his latest recording, Not Getting Behind is the New Getting Ahead, is his attempt to reflect those changes and adaptations that we've all had to make in our communities over the past couple of years. And those reflections through tunes like There Used to Be a Nightclub There, Economy with Dignity, Ghost Mall, and the title track emphasize Charlie's commitment to the people as well as to the groove. Charlie's on this one, plus longtime friend and drummer Scott Amendola, a dynamic duo featured on this CD. They create the grooves and the moods on this disc that addresses the right now blues, if I can call it that. It's good for all that ails you. This is yours truly, the Watchman, Greg Bryant. We'll hear a portion of the tune Economy with Dignity, and that'll be followed by our talk with Charlie Hunter about his new record, his relationship to the beat, the DIY model, and an early up-close live dose of John Lee Hooker that he got as a youth. Hear it right now on JazzWatch.
I had friends when I was growing up in Berkeley, because Berkeley really was at that time in the 70s. It really was whatever people want to call diverse or multicultural, but no one ever had that thought. It was just the way that things actually were, you know. So I had a lot of friends who went to church and had that kind of musical experience, which I didn't have because my mom was a commie, you know, so I didn't have any church stuff. But, you know, so the people that I would eventually play music with, they had that, you know, that was some of the people, that was a part of their reality. But my mom always had those blues records on around the house all the time, you know, and she was involved in one of her many political things. She was involved was getting a guy who actually was wrongfully convicted of a crime. They had a defense fund for him, and John Lee Hooker played a benefit for it, and it was in a warehouse in East Oakland. I remember it vividly because it was cold. Like, you know, the Bay Area gets very damp and cold, and there's no heat, you know. But I was about 12, and he had a band with an organist and a bass player and a drummer and another guitar player. And this was the late 70s, you know, so, you know, there was still some of that holdover. Those guys were probably playing that music like they had played it in the 60s, you know, in the 50s. And the band got up and started playing. And, you know, all my mom's music was acoustic music, you know, so I heard that. But I had never been front and center, like in front of a Hammond organ before, or heard a drummer play a shuffle like that or anything. And this Hammond organ player was, I don't know who he was amazing, you know, and he did that whole thing where there was so much spirit in what he was doing, and that they started playing, and they started playing was, and he's like hitting all those notes, and I started really getting like freaked out, like I was so into it, and I fainted. I actually fainted. So sorry, but I did. I was this 12-year-old Berkeley kid, and I fainted, you know, and it was like, it was okay because no one cared, because the parents didn't really care about anything then, because they were just all hippies and whatnot. No one really, they were just like, yeah, these kids can take care of themselves, you know. But I fainted, and then John Lee Hooker came on and played, and then I was taking it all in, and I was just like 3 or 4 feet from him, and there were like 100 people there, and since my mom was one of the crazy commie organizers of this thing, you know, we got to hang out after. And it was just like sitting there with John Lee Hooker for like a couple hours as a kid, just watching how he interacted with people and his music and, you know, and all that stuff. It was heavy. And, you know, she took me to see Sonny Terry and Brownie McGhee and Taj Mahal, who actually I grew up with his daughter. So, you know, I would see him around as a kid. So, you know, that music was always around. And if you're going to play guitar, really, I feel there's no better way to get into the guitar than through that music, you know, because there's just such a wealth of information in there. Like, I think that that's the best background that you can have as a guitar player.
For sure, for sure. And, you know, over the last few years, you've really been showing those roots, so to speak. And I know your new record, which we were kind of talking about some yesterday, Not Getting Behind, has definitely got that visceral element to it. And I guess when you're playing with somebody like Scott that you have a rapport with, how do you sort of I guess, is there any planning that goes into it, or it's just like, hey, here's some tunes, we're just gonna, you know, let it come out naturally? Was this album sort of conceptual at all before you did it?
Yeah. It was conceptual in terms of writing the songs. Like, I had an idea for the vibe of each tune that I wanted to make happen, and you know, basically with Scott, you know, I mean, like I was telling you yesterday, anyone, you know, when you have played, you know, I'm 45, I've been doing this since I was a teenager, and you know, some of the guys and gals I've been playing with for years. So, you know, you develop a rapport with people, and you don't have to say, hey, do this. Like when, you know, Derek Phillips, who lives in your town, when we get together and play, it's just like, I don't say, hey, do this, do that. It's just like, we are known quantities, and when we get together, we form another known quantity because we have a group kind of dynamic. And so it's the same with Scott, and I have the same rapport with a few other drummers, you know, Bobby Previtt and Tony Mason, and you know, and when we get together, it's just like, boom, there it is, you know, and it is a thing. So with Scott, all I did was I just said, hey, this is the idea of this song, go for it, count to 4, and then we're gonna go, because it's only count to 4 for me. I don't count to 5 or 7 or a bar of 3/8 or anything like that.
Oh my God, that's wild. That's wild. I like to ask musicians, What types of audiences do you generally enjoy playing for? You know, like, say, for instance, back in the day, Bill Evans said he preferred be completely quiet. You know, he didn't want any applause at all. Someone like John Coltrane said he really appreciated if they got into it and verbally, you know, exuded the fact that they were enjoying the music. You know, what kind of balance do you like? I know you've played in front of a lot of different crowds in a lot of different situations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think really, to me, what I like most is when, you know, it's the band and you have a couple hundred people in a room and we're all together and it's all about us. It's not about me being like, I am the man, check me out. And it's not about the audience being, I'm going to yell stuff inappropriate time so everyone can check me out. It's more about we, the audience, and you, the performers, create an us. And we're on this wavelength and we're going to take this trip together. And we're going to, as an audience, let you know what's going on and where we're at this point. And you as a performer are going to let us know. We're going to have this great back and forth. And for a couple hours, we're all going to forget about whatever tyrannical left brain stuff is going on all the time. And that's what I like to make happen, you know.
For sure, for sure. And we want to let the people know, too, on your Facebook page, you had a little contest. Your newest record, Not Getting Behind, is on vinyl now, and you asked the folks maybe which selection between Baboon Strength and Copperopolis would they like to see, and could you tell the folks who won the balloting? Which album won the balloting?
Looks like Baboon Strength won the balloting, which is actually convenient for me because Copperopolis is so long, I'd have to put it out on a double record, and if I cut it down, I'd have to cut down so much that it'd be a problem, you know. So it looks like Baboon, and even Baboon is going to be minus a track, you know, because if you have the record sides too long, you get hiss, you know, you get a lot of noise going on. So c'est la vie. But I'm going to try to get Copperopolis out there. I'm going to see if I can make it happen as the next one I put out, you know.
Right on, man. Right on. When did you make a conscious decision to say, I really wanted to be involved in all aspects of what I'm doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was just by necessity, you know, and I've worked lots and lots of jobs. I didn't go to music school. I spent my time, you know, playing gigs and working jobs for bosses that, you know, owned small businesses, or I worked in a candle factory. I worked in a used office furniture warehouse. You know, I mean, I've worked on construction sites, you know, all these kinds of jobs. And you see how these small business owners do things. And, you know, generally the successful ones are able to do every aspect of the job, you know. So, you know, I kind of took that to heart. And, you know, there were times when it was too big for me to do every aspect of the job. But, you know, I was in the van driving and we were touring. And I mean, that's all I do now is I get in a car and I drive thousands of miles and play gigs, and I do everything. And you know, at this point I really wouldn't have it any other way. It's so much simpler. You know, the few headaches that I get are headaches of my own mistakes, not anybody else's mistakes. So I only have myself to blame, and I build in the fact that I'm going to mess up a few times. And you know, I just realized that even if you have, like back in the day when I was coming up, you could have a record contract and you could be, you know, on the cover of all these magazines and all this stuff, but that isn't going to last because you're only new once, you're only young once, and if you want to sustain a career and you really love what you do, then you really have to take as much as you can into your own hands and get out there. And when I was doing it, a lot of my contemporaries, who are great guys and gals and great musicians, the ones more in the jazz field, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to get in a van. They wanted to play the jazz festivals and the gigs, and you know, they didn't want to be seen as grunting it out, I think. And that just was their choice. It's not a judgment on that was a choice they made. But you know, my ultimate goal, like we were talking about yesterday, and Dave Chappelle, when he walked away from that, and all of those, millions of dollars, I heard an interview with him. He said, well, my dad, who is a professor, said, when you go into this world, you need to decide how much money is enough. Decide how much money is enough, then anyone is going to be able to manipulate you to do whatever they want to do. And apparently he said, well, how much do you make? And his dad said, well, I'm a professor. I make I don't know what it was, $100,000 a year. He says, well, that'd be fine with me. And so that's my mentality as well. It's like, people that I respect, teachers and professors and some civil servants, stuff like that. It's like, hey, I'd be happy to make that kind of a living, and do what I really love to do, and I feel like I've played for the massive rock stadium audiences. I've done the sheds. I've done the big rock clubs. I've done all of that stuff. And I'm glad I did because I don't need to do it anymore. If someone comes along and says, hey, we got a big, huge tour for you, I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll do it. You twisted my arm. But I enjoy the fact that I can just get in my car, get on the road with me and a drummer and play for a room of 100 people and have a real quality experience. That to me is enough. That'll work,
Nice. And we know over the years you've been involved in some really cool side projects. I got wind of one that might be in development right now concerning some top 40. You want to tell us about that, man?
Sure. I had this idea to kind of put together a quote-unquote super group, which I think is really the corniest thing ever. But it was mostly just because guys that I don't get a chance to play with as much anymore, Bobby Previtt, Skerrick, and Stephen Bernstein, the slide trumpet player from Sex Mob and many other, Levon Helm's band. And the idea was that it was going to be a band that only played music that was on the radio today, our kind of deconstructed versions of it. But then I realized, unfortunately, only about 20% of what's on the radio today is strong enough to withstand a good deconstructing. So we changed it to top 40, and then we realized that was too many things to choose from. So we narrowed it down to only things that were number one in the top 40 at some time. So we'll be playing music going all the way back to the 50s up to stuff that's on the radio today. And the name of the group is Omaha Diner, because that is apparently, according to Bobby Previtt, where they thought up the idea for top 40 was in an Omaha diner.
You can catch the Omaha Diner group March 1st at New York's Cutting Room and March the 2nd at Philadelphia's World Cafe Live. And of course, Charlie with Scott Amendola, that duo will go to Japan this February. Shout out to all of our listeners over there. More info on Charlie Hunter at facebook.com/Charlie Hunter and the website charliehunter.com. Special thanks to No Stress for our theme and transition tracks. No Stress is a hip-hop track maker on the rise that you should check out. More informations and sounds on No Stress available at nostress.bandcamp.com. JazzWatch is written by yours truly, Greg Bryant, produced and edited by Dara Tucker, all for Watchman Music. Thanks a lot. Keep active, keep those ears open, and we'll see you real soon.